There is a specific quiet intensity found in a room late at night, when the only light is the glow of an unfinished prototype. I have long believed that the act of building is socially multiplicative. When creators gather around interesting work, they share ideas, push each other forward, and collectively lighten the burden of creation. This relies on a specific systems assumption, that the primary barrier stopping people from bringing their ideas to life is simply technical friction. So I set up an experiment to test this. I provided a group of participants with an environment stripped of almost all friction, access to high-end tooling, dedicated collaborative spaces, a streamlined onboarding, and one-on-one mentorship. The logic was straightforward. If you engineer a space that completely eliminates technical barriers, the natural human response should be an explosion of accelerated creation. At first, the environment functioned exactly as intended. People eagerly showed up. They gathered around tables, discussed side projects, and actively explored new concepts together. But this graph captures the exact moment the hypothesis broke. As the line representing technical friction plunges straight down to zero, the actual output of creation doesn't skyrocket. It suddenly diverges and flatlines. Whatever was stopping these participants in their tracks, it had absolutely nothing to do with the machines, the software, or the workflow design. The dominant force suppressing creation wasn't technical, it was psychological and existential. When you step away from the digital infrastructure and observe the physical spaces where creators meet, the crowded food halls and local tech meetups, you start to see the cracks in the ecosystem. Participants were walking into these perfectly optimized, low-friction spaces with entirely misaligned orientations toward the act of making something new. In practice, the actual behavior often looked like something other than building. Many participants sought belonging or permission. They wanted to feel close to the possibility of innovation without the risk of making actual contact with reality. Providing 50 people with a shared physical space does not automatically generate a shared psychological intent among them. In fact, these open, in-person collaborative environments often triggered the exact opposite of collaborative acceleration. Instead of sharing, participants became highly protective. They grew increasingly fearful of judgment and aggressively resistant to testing their concepts in the real world. We can map out this reaction through a concept called embodied ambiguity. Look at this network visualization, starting with a single idea in the center. Online, the uncertainty of building feels abstract and entirely safe. But in person, as these perception nodes representing the observation of others start closing in, that ambiguity becomes a physical, intimidating threat. External observation traps the concept. When people express an intense fear of idea leakage, they rarely possess valuable intellectual property that requires hiding. They are deploying a psychological shield to avoid the vulnerability of reality contact. Facing intense, unyielding uncertainty naturally forces human beings to seek out stabilizing, authoritative structures to lean on. This leads to a mechanism known as externalized cognition. You can see the intended healthy state of our experiment in this flow diagram. A central facilitator node pushes tools and access outward to a balanced web of independent builders. But watch as the dynamic mutates. The builders unconsciously begin outsourcing their decision-making and momentum. The flow reverses, and heavy lines of emotional load and uncertainty pour backward, entirely burying the facilitator under an asymmetrical weight. The environment turned into a negative bank account. Investing energy to accelerate others rarely yielded mutual momentum. Instead, it repeatedly produced dependency and withdrawal. By trying to clear away all the technical obstacles for a group of people, a system designer inadvertently transforms themselves into an unsustainable emotional crutch. The scarcity in these systems isn't found in the ideas themselves. Concepts are abundant. The friction lies elsewhere. The actual requirement for success is an execution ecosystem. The real grueling work, developing psychological stamina, earning community trust, maintaining social alignment, and pushing through distribution hurdles, only begins after the idea already exists. Ideas are cheap. The psychological resilience required to maintain momentum in public is exceptionally rare. Looking closely at the outcome, this experiment does not reveal a failure of the model, nor does it mean the participants were acting maliciously or lazily. They were acting completely rationally to protect their own identities when forced to navigate extreme uncertainty. Human beings arrive at the act of creation possessing radically different, highly fragile emotional architectures. We can engineer flawless workspaces, streamline complex code, and provide the greatest tools ever created. But it is impossible to design a system that overrides the existential human fear of the unknown.